Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well. So it's time for another album review and time for another review of one of my favourite Scandinavian metal bands, this being this time Enslaved, with their release Heimdal, which came out last week on Friday via Nuclear Blast. And the album is 7 tracks and just about 50 minutes in length. In the lineup for Enslaved, we have Brutal Jeltsin on the vocals and bass. You also have Ivar Bjornsson, who is on rhythm guitar. Both of those band members have been there pretty much since the start of Enslaved. You've got Arv Isdal on lead guitar, Hakon Vinje, keyboards and clean vocals, and Ivar Sandoy, I think, on drums, keyboard and vocals. Not sure I'm pronouncing those last names correctly there, apologies if not. So Enslaved, another very consistent bands who do not have a dud in their discography, and I'm pleased to announce once again that this album is almost definitely not a dud. It's another strong album in a string of strong albums that this band have also been putting out recently, with their fusion with more progressive rock, more electronic elements that they have introduced to us in about the last 10 to 15 years. And you can see once again with this album that those elements are very much present. But I think if you're a fan of Enslaved's old school black metal 90s, more aggressive albums and more intense albums, this album's quite got that intensity of some of those albums. Yes, it still retains its proggier elements, its electronic moments certainly are very present in this album, but it's quite an intense, quite aggressive album from Enslaved, this one, that actually reminded me a bit. I was trying to think of an album to compare this one to a bit, and I sort of thought of Retear from 2012. I thought that there was a bit of Retear in this album, but with more of the recent proggier electronic aspects incorporated into their music. So yeah, it's another solid Enslaved album. So let's go into the tracks a little bit more here. So you've got the opener, Behind the Mirror. Excellent start to the album, an excellent way to kick off the album. Sort of has that stompy riff, that sequence of low notes that really kind of stamp the authority on this track to start off the album. And then you have those weird time signature changes that Enslaved like to do before they sort of do their chorus in this track. And no track is ever really very predictable from Enslaved. You get the occasional track where you recognise the choruses and stuff, but they always transition 2 or 3 times at least in a track, so you're never quite sure what you're going to get next. One of the things I love about Enslaved is they do that. They're a complex, musically they're quite a complex band, but they do bring in stuff which you'll always remember. They make their music memorable despite being that little bit more complex. And I think Behind the Mirror is a good example of one of those sorts of songs where they maneuver you around, but you're always remembering sort of the main moments of the track and you're not forgetting them. They do that very, very well. I think it's one of Enslaved's great skills. Congelia, the second track, man, I love this song. It's very progressive track, and the little electronic touches, it's kind of like this echoey keyboard effect or keyboard note that comes after that sort of, swirly riff. I don't know how else to describe it, and you get that little echoey electronic effect afterwards that kind of I can't really do it, but it's a really cool moment in the song. And it's sort of like the interlude before it goes back into something with more of a hook involved in the track. And I love Congelia a lot. It's like 8 minutes, but it's a really good demonstration of Enslaved doing good build-ups in their songs. Forest Dweller is a little on the slower side to begin with anyway. After about 2 minutes, it bursts into more recognisable black metal Enslaved, classic Enslaved guitar riffage. Also, I've got Kingdom. Kingdom, one of my favourite tracks on the album. One of the more memorable tracks because it has that riff that just really stands out at you. Pretty simple riff by Enslaved standards, but it just really stands out. Yeah, really enjoyed that one as well. Another track I quite enjoyed was Eternal Sea, and that was before they... Now, this is the one moment in the album where, if I'm to be critical, I noticed a track appear here, which was obviously, Caravans to the Outer Worlds, which was from their 2021 EP release, Caravans to the Outer Worlds. I thought, I've heard this before when I was listening to the album first time. I was like, oh, they're borrowing material from the EP. I know bands do this sometimes. They borrow tracks from an earlier release or an EP or another album. And I'm not going to make this a big criticism of the album because, and the reason I'm not going to make it be too critical of this choice to include this track in the album, and actually part of Heimdal sounded very familiar as well, as though I think that may have also come from Caravans to the Outer Worlds. The reason I'm not going to be too critical on this point is because it fits so well with the album. It fits really well with Heimdal as an album. So I can see why they included those particularly Caravans to the Outer Worlds in the album. And I mean, Heimdal, the title track, is such a killer closing track. It's absolutely killer. That, you know, even though I recognise one of the riffs, the rhythms in that track, still, what a great song and way to finish this album off. Probably my favourite tracks on here, Congelia, Kingdom, and probably the closing track as well. But it's just a really good album through and through. Not too much in the way of criticism rather of this album, I don't think. Except, you know, I would have liked to see a little bit more fresh in the album, maybe, even maybe making the album. It's 50 minutes, so it's not a short album, but perhaps a little more might have satisfied me just that bit more. So I'm going to give this album an 8 out of 10. Like I say, they're a band, they don't have, they just couldn't do a bad album if they tried. It's not in their blood. It's not in this band's blood. They don't have bad albums in their blood. So that's it from me. An 8 out of 10 for Enslaved's Heimdal. What did you think of this album? Did you enjoy it as much as me? How would you rate it? How do you think it stacks up against the other albums in their discography? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, for me, this is the end of this review. Take care, everybody. Until next time, bye for now.